Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you all for joining us during the Lytham Partners Spring 2022 Investor Conference. My name is Robert Breza, Vice President of Lytham Partners. Before we begin, for those who are not familiar with Lytham Partners, it's one of the country's leading investor relations firm with more than 2 decades of corporate access experience. We've built one of the most industrial, diverse platforms for connecting small cap companies with high quality institutional investors. On the presentation today, we have 3 dynamic companies who are helping to disrupt the construction industry, all in their own unique way. Today we have IBI Group, one of the world's largest architectural engineering firms, ProStar, another leader in mapping the underground world, and Kontrol, a leader in smart building technologies focused on sustaining energy conservation and reducing greenhouse gas emissions. Today I'm going to ask each of the companies to give us a brief background on themselves and their companies. Let's first begin with Stephen Taylor, the CFO from IBI Group. When you look at this, Stephen, transforming IBI technology, for people who are not familiar, you started back in 2018, reducing the company's debt to the lowest level in history, leading the company now to an industry-leading backlog, 17 months. Can you walk us through this transformation, but more importantly, as you walk through this technology pivot, you're in a position now, as you look out 5 years, what are you pivoting now? Please go ahead. Thanks.
Sure, Rob. Thanks a lot. Back in 2017, as you pointed out, our objective had been very much in the business to drive investment out of the balance sheet, generate cash, pay down debt. Then the focus changed in 2017. We looked around at some of our other peers, comparable, certainly Canadian public companies in our industry, and their growth seemed to be coming only from adding more bodies, as we refer to it, more bums in seats was the only way they were getting growth. So they were doing a lot of acquisitions, but in terms of earnings per share growth and growth in EBITDA percent, it wasn't happening. So one of the unique things about our business in our industry compared to our peers is that we have 20% of our business is what we call intelligence, which we have been writing software code on behalf of clients and doing technology consulting engagements for clients, primarily in traffic, tolling, traveler information. But we've been in that industry for approximately 30 years now. So we looked at our other 2 sectors, our infrastructure and our building sectors, and came to the conclusion, here we were operating in 2 industries where there hadn't been much technological change in the last 50 years. And the world is changing around us, and technology is having a pervasive impact on what goes on in the business world. And we decided to do our pivot to become a technology-driven design firm, just because we'd like to be leading the pack and not trailing along afterwards, trying to catch up with everybody else. And it has had a very pervasive impact on our business overall, led to some significant growth. As you pointed out, our backlog has grown 8% in the last year. And last year we grew revenue by over 13%, which in our industry is quite spectacular. And so the move to technology, using our buildings and infrastructure segments as channels to market for the technology capability that we have in-house, paying great dividends for IBI.
Great, thank you. Next, I'd like to kind of more or less sandwich Paige Tucker, CEO of ProStar, for our next question. The company is really interesting from a perspective that they map the underground world with incredible precision. I mean, 1 centimeter precision. Paige, can you help us kind of understand, educate us on the regulatory environment as you see the requirements getting more and more defined for mapping and recording these accuracy levels?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, number one, I'd like to put things into perspective. There's 2.5 million miles of paved roads in the United States. And we know from the campaigning coming out of the White House for the last 24 months from both parties that infrastructure is critical to our economy. and it's becoming dilapidated and in serious need of repair and replacement. There's 35 million miles of buried utilities and pipelines in the United States, and that underground infrastructure is also becoming dilapidated and in serious need of repair and replacement. And what's happening because of a lot of the construction that's taking place based at the federal and state level, it's creating awareness of how critical that below ground infrastructure is, and that there's a very high possibility that through all the construction and improving our roads, our bridges, our highways and railway systems, that we could damage that underground infrastructure. So for example, in Colorado, they recently mandated our software. So if you own the infrastructure, meaning the utilities or the pipelines, or you're the company that constructs them, or you're a company that maintains and manages them, by law, you're required to use our software to precisely identify the location of where those utilities and pipelines are buried and provide that information back to the state. Because obviously it's the state's job and responsibility to make sure that they protect both the public and our environment. And anytime you hit a utility or pipeline, some bad things can happen. I mean, you can have injury to the workers or to the public. You could have, severe flooding. You could have traffic delays that last for hours. But worst case scenarios, you could have dangerous petroleum products that are seeping into our water systems, or you could have loss of life. And I would argue that the loss of life scenario is actually happening far too frequently, and that number is only going up with each passing year. And then we also, in New Jersey, they've mandated that every municipality has to report to the state where their water systems are located and do so digitally. So we're starting to see some regulation, not only at the state level, but at the municipal level. And I think once this infrastructure bill kicks in, and there's hundreds of billions of dollars going into the repair and replacement of not only our roads and our bridges and highway systems, but also for our sewage systems, drinking water systems, expansion of broadband, that the issue and the danger that surrounds working in and around these utilities is going to become much more prevalent. And I think we'll see even more regulation, especially coming from the federal government, because the fact is a lot of people don't realize that utility and pipeline companies don't know where their utilities and pipelines are located, not to any level of accuracy, and that's going to create some serious problems.
Great, thank you, Paige. Paul, can you help investors think about your company? As I understand it, and try to put it in investors' phrases, you're helping buildings get smarter, faster, quicker, save energy. Can you help educate people on some of the large customers you have and what kind of returns they're seeing?
Sure, Rob. So thank you. I come from the renewable energy industry prior to launching Kontrol around 2016. And that was about putting power onto the grid, government-supported feed-in tariffs. We started to notice at the tail end of 2014 that governments in the developed world were really skeptical of new power plants and began to focus on the idea of every building waste and emission waste. And so what we know about buildings right now is in North America alone, there's about 200 billion a year in energy spend, rising at about 10% per year. And so that is a serious challenge if you're going to think about emissions. And it's also a serious challenge in terms of operating profit and how these buildings are valued. So for every dollar saved in energy, today you're getting about a 20x return on valuation. That's a very compelling return for doing the right thing and also cutting waste. So what Kontrol does is we work on a platform of entering the building with more technology at the suite level or the building level, where we can monitor, manage, and control energy consumption, which has a direct and corresponding benefit to reducing GHG emissions. And we do that in two defined verticals: the commercial sector, where we are primarily dealing with REITs, public REITs and private REITs on the commercial and multi-residential side. And then on the industrial side, we've got some of the largest emitters in the world in the oil and gas and cement sectors as customers, where we're monitoring and helping them manage their emissions in real time. So when you put all that together, the way we define our business is every building over 40,000 square feet is a potential customer. And for that customer, we want to help them with their energy, their emissions, and their overall sustainability.
That's great. Stephen, I'd love to bring you back into the conversation here and talk about when companies are facing wage pressure in setting up contracts. You're unique in the sense that your contracts are very flexible, I think, and there isn't much margin pressure, or the pressure you're able to see, some of it's able to be passed on. What kind of other things are really maintaining your employee base for you, would you say?
So, Rob, we operate out of 60 offices in 11 different countries across the world. And every one of those markets is a different situation in terms of competition for labor and the quality of the skill that you can employ there. Now, you mentioned our contracts. We have multiple different forms of contracts that we enter into when we're designing a facility for a client. Some of them are driven off of, we get a percentage of the total construction cost of the project. So in an inflationary environment, what tends to end up happening is the overall cost of the project goes up, and we actually have a benefit because our fees go up significantly. In many of our other contracts, we have built-in inflation clauses where when our wage rates go up, we are entitled to pass that along into the cost of what we're billing our clients. And we also, on some of the larger fixed price contracts, have contingencies built in to the budgets for the projects where wage inflation is assumed right at the start of the project. So we're pretty well shielded. But as I mentioned before, we are utilizing our multinational status. So we're doing a tremendous number of transit projects here in Canada, and there's a great need for engineering talent. We have had a long-established presence in Athens, Greece, and the Greek economy has not recovered since 2008, 2009. There is a wealth of engineering talent in Greece, and we are utilizing that talent to actually do a lot of our engineering back office engineering work. We have a significant presence in India. And so for the software side of our business and the development of a lot of software tools, we are sourcing the labor for that out of India in many cases. And we've recently added Mexico, where we also have a presence. There are an awful lot of good architectural talent in Mexico. And so we have built out design studios in Mexico to help carry some of the load for our North American building projects. We work as one firm across the world. We have uniform technology. We operate in a full Microsoft environment and make extensive use of Microsoft Teams. So we've got multiple different strategies for dealing with wage price inflation. And as a result, our margins are not being impacted significantly.
That's great. Paul, I was wondering if you could bring us into the world of ESG and how convergence of technology, and specifically a big focus of yours, is trying to help companies look at ESG and really comply. What is that, the formation, I guess, or the transformation of ESG becoming to the forefront over the last year or two? I would assume it's leading to more discussions. Can you help us understand how ESG has impacted your business?
For sure. So I think as a concept, it's moving from fringe to accepted. And so typically what happens with things that impact the environment is, we don't always start agreeing on a concept that we should be working towards. But I think now we're getting closer. So what's causing that? You have what I would call, corporate responsibility mandates. You stakeholder activism, and you have governments. And I think all those forces are coming together today to help shape the policy of the future. So in some cases of our business, we're dealing with customers that have regulated emissions. And what does that mean? That means anything they're putting into the air is being monitored or regulated at the state or provincial level. And federal policy is maybe less important because of that particular site, where that site's located. At the federal level, you then have other policy, which is kind of shifting towards, okay, now that we're managing that, how do we integrate emissions, a larger emission story into that? So I think that's what you're seeing at the federal level. At the state and local level, you're seeing much more regulation of what goes in the air. So I think that's all really coming together. And on the commercial side, it's quite interesting. The commercial market has basically been immune to ESG unless it was, adopted at the board or company level. What's happening now in New York's a good example, is this idea of a carbon tax. If you're not a good steward of your building and you're an energy consumer with too much energy, you're going to be penalized through a carbon tax. And I think that is a concept that is now coming to the forefront in more and more discussion. So I think really the way to think about it is you've got all these forces moving together at the same time, helping shape this new policy, which is really one of let's use less energy, let's build with better materials. We're going to have to report, and we have people looking over our shoulder, and maybe there's a tax that we're going to pay if we don't comply. And I think for us, all those things represent the wind at our back.
That's great. My next question would be for Paige. As you look at the utility industry, you mentioned loss of life. A question came up. What is, I think there was a case study cited that you'd put out regarding the reduction and the number of reduction. It would seem that insurance companies would want to almost mandate your technology like the municipalities are. Can you please expand on that? Thanks.
Certainly, yeah. What we did about 2 years ago is we aligned ourselves with one of the largest infrastructure construction companies in North America. And what they wanted to do was implement our software and quantify and measure the impact that it had. And what we were able to measure is that we reduced utility and pipeline strikes on a project over a 1 year span by 97%, which is millions of dollars in cost savings just on the liability and risk of hitting utility and pipeline. But the one thing you can't measure is the downtime of the work crews or the impact that could potentially have on the environment or on public safety, because in some cases you can have loss of life. And I don't know what kind of price tag you can put on someone's life, but needless to say, that level of reduction is significant. And as a result of that, the company that I'm referring to adopted our software not only into the division of what they call infrastructure, but also into water, power, and light rail. So yeah, that was a significant study that was done with a very high profile customer.
Stephen, I'd love to turn back to technology-driven regulation and loss of life, try to move to digital twin, something dear to my heart as I'm an identical twin. Can you walk us through what digital twin means for an investor and how that helps you essentially sell better, or more importantly, creates avenues of opportunity?
Sure. Rob, one of the things that I haven't mentioned so far, but the focus of IBI is in urban centers. We largely help developers and governments build cities and things related to the infrastructure required to run cities. Now, each one of those structures that we're designing, we're doing almost all the design in BIM modeling these days. It creates a mathematical model of what the structure is going to look like and all the various elements that are inside the structure. We are using tools like parametric design in conjunction with our BIM modeling. It creates a database of information, which when combined with the appropriate software to interpret it, it creates what's called a digital twin. So basically, the space that I'm sitting, it appears I'm sitting in at the moment, is our Smart City Sandbox in Toronto. And we have for our Toronto office, which houses 800 people, we have a complete digital twin of that particular space that we utilize to help monitor and lower the cost of operating the structure over the life of the asset. And that is something that's unique to our business is if you have a client comes and is going to build a structure with $100 million capital cost, their ongoing operations costs over time are going to be about 10% per year of what that initial capital cost was. It's just very expensive to own and maintain the built form. What our clients are rapidly realizing and coming to us, they want the digital twin, the mathematical model of what we designed for them so that they can tie it together with other software products and other tools that they will use, technology tools that they will use to control and in some cases lower that operating cost over the life of the asset. Healthcare is a tremendous example of that. We design hospitals and the actual bricks and mortar of building a hospital is a fraction of what it costs to run the thing over a period of time. People like healthcare institutions are very interested in what their digital twin, what they can do with it, how they can make use of other technology to lower operating costs over time.
That's fantastic. Next question, I guess, Paul, or for everybody, I've kind of Stephen stole my question. What are customers asking you for? So maybe Paul, that's about as straightforward as a question, I guess, I can ask you is, what are your customers really demanding of you, and what are they asking for you to do not only today, but what do they want from you in the future?
Sure. So our primary customer on the commercial side is commercial Class B. And we specifically focus on that market because it's underserved. It has a lot less technology than it needs. And I believe there's a stat that 80% of Class B buildings have less technology than required to operate a successful and sustainable building. So I think we've defined our market on that side. We stay away from commercial Class A, which for us is very crowded and mega cap driven in terms of who's servicing that. So from that perspective, it's really adding technology that drives value. And that value is lowering operating costs, adding more automation, adding more transparency, unifying buildings across multiple platforms into one, and delivering a rate of return that is 3-year payback or less if you're making a retrofit. In terms of the regulated side of the business, it's really driven by policy. So as long as the policy is robust, we've got a great market we feed into. Customers have to buy someone's solution. Oftentimes that's ours. And on the regulated side, it's a nice business, but it tends to be a slightly lower growth business because most plants that are regulated have some form of technology. So it depends really on who the customer is. And for us, it's being well diversified and playing in both the regulated and unregulated market.
As a follow-up, Paul, I'd love to dig into the technology just for a quick second, because I think your technology is differentiated. Help people understand how you're able to manage multiple businesses through a single console, or how you came up with that idea, because I think that's fairly unique amongst your competitors.
Yeah, so I think if you think about Class A buildings or large buildings, they come prepackaged with very robust building automation system, and then it's really how do you use that building automation system? How do you optimize it? From our customer perspective, it's very low automation on site. We're adding that, and then if you own 5 buildings, and you only have visibility into one because you've got to dive into that automation system, we create a layer of transparency with software that allows you to see all of them in real time operating. And so the more buildings you have, the more value you can generate off our platform. And that is really driven by at the building level and also what we call the suite level, which in the apartment sector, which is, so one of our larger clients will have 15,000 doors across the country. Our technology gives them the opportunity to look at each door as an energy consumer in that building. And so that unified platform is something that we've developed I think it gives us a competitive advantage in a slightly crowded market. And it's something that we're expanding most recently into the US.
I would crack a joke here and say, does it have a speaker and tell your kid to shut the door? But I'll leave that for another day. Paige, the next question is for you. For people who are really unfamiliar with the inner workings of the technology, your technology includes or incorporates geospace technology, and there's significant number of patents that the company owns that kind of outlines that technology to some degree. But we'd love to hear you talk about the technology at its maybe combination of ability to do Bluetooth connectivity, et cetera, and how you're pulling off the satellite communications. Thanks.
Yeah, so there's a combination of technologies that's required to be able to provide the solution that we're marketing. But I'll explain it basically, because at the end of the day, it's pretty simple. If you take a look at Google Maps is built on a cloud and mobile technology platform that also leverages GPS. Those are the three main components. But Google is based on a location service where you have line of sight. So there's a GPS chip that's embedded in any smartphone device, where most of us are familiar with Google Maps. So what I mean by location services is you're often looking for a destination. Maybe it's a hotel in an unfamiliar city. You're trying to get back to the airport. You punch in the address. You get close enough to where you can see either the address or you can see the sign, and you can turn the app off and you're happy with what Google Maps has provided. The chip that's embedded in the mobile device is accurate to about 3 meters, which again gives you line of sight. We are in the critical infrastructure construction industry. So our clients are Fortune 500 construction companies, large utilities, government agencies, municipalities. In their world, everything is considered survey grade, which is 1 to 6 centimeters. So in a nutshell, we've designed our own geospatial engine, similar to Google Maps. Think of us as the Google Maps of the underground. And we're leveraging modern cloud and mobile technology, but we're integrating into precision GPS receivers. These receivers are external and they provide accuracies down to the centimeter. So when you combine our proprietary technologies, as you mentioned, that are patented, and you leverage modern technology platforms, including cloud and mobile technology, and GPS receivers that can provide centimeter accuracy. Combine those together, as you mentioned, using, like, say, for example, Bluetooth technologies, which allow you to pair to all these technologies. Then we have the ability to capture, record, and display the precise location of critical infrastructure, both above and below ground, which includes utilities and pipelines, down to the centimeter.
That's great. Stephen, the next question, I guess, for you, as you're looking at, the geopolitical situation, when, and I'm going to ask all three of you, but I'm pretty sure I know all the answers, but it's on top of everybody's mind. I mean, how much exposure do you have to Russia/Ukraine, and are you seeing any impact? And I'll just start with you, Stephen, and go to Paul and Paige, respectively.
For us, we don't do, other than our operation in Greece, we don't do a lot of work in Europe. So our exposure to that part of the world is minimal. We have very little. The only area where it might potentially come back and play a role is where Russian money in particular is being used to finance projects in the rest of the world. But we haven't seen anything so far.
Never thought of that angle, but it's interesting. Paul, I'm not sure if you're gone over the international side much.
We don't have direct exposure. I would say where we're being impacted is the supply chain. So the global supply chain is not where it was pre-COVID.
Sure.
We have certain technologies where you're looking at processing chips and other Zigbee chips and all that wonderful stuff. And so those are definitely facing delays and shortages. And then on larger projects, I would say for a customer that's doing a building retrofit where you're changing out the boilers to a more efficient system and adding your software and monitoring that, we're seeing lag times in 6 to 8 weeks in terms of getting equipment on site. And so I would say in general, I think the war has exacerbated, kind of a poor global supply chain. Some of that may be temporary. That we don't know yet, but certainly I would say the global supply chains have been impacted. Yeah.
Paige, predominantly US based, and I know, but talk to the international aspect of your product. I believe it's offered worldwide, many different languages. Can you expand about the opportunity of what you see internationally on I guess, in the future?
Well, I refer to the fact that we have over 30 million miles of buried utilities and pipelines in the United States alone. 50% of those utilities and pipelines were put into the ground between 50 to 100 years ago. And as I mentioned, the issue of becoming dilapidated and in serious need of repair and replacement, I would think, is a much greater concern than our above ground infrastructure. But the United States is relatively young compared to other parts of the world. So they're facing the same issue. And we're talking about an infrastructure that delivers our drinking water, disposes our sewage, runs our businesses with power, and provides, heat and air conditioning to our homes. So this is a big problem worldwide that's getting a lot more visualization, if you will, and exposure. So even though our focus has predominantly been in the United States, where this is a big country with a big problem, the way we designed our system is it works anywhere in the world, any language, any currency. We don't have to change anything. And in fact, we're in discussions with other companies in other countries about adopting our solution right now. So we are looking to expand globally. But yeah, our focus over the past few years has just been in the United States.
Great. Well, I want to say thank you both, or thank you to everybody here, Stephen, Paul, Paige. Thank you all very much. I do want to remind everybody who have not signed up for a one-on-one, you can send me an email at Breza, B-R-E-Z-A, at Lytham Partners, L-Y-T-H-A-M, partners.com. Click on /virtual in the one-on-one meeting request button. With that, I want to say thank you to everybody again, Stephen, Paul, and Paige. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.